Ready to. Okay, good morning again. This is our second meeting on resentment, on step 4 resentment. And we're going to take a 2-week break and we'll meet again in early January. And I really appreciate you being present. Um, so, and I've got a lot of stuff that I want to talk about. And I think I'm going to begin with reading some stuff before getting into this ancillary things. So, last week we read on page 63. We started on that and we got into page 64. And I'm going to reread part of what we started with from page 64. So he's talking. It's the paragraph. He starts talking about taking a personal inventory and the necessity of that for a good business to go through this fact-finding, fact-facing process and discover the truth about the stock in trade, but we're referring to our mental ideas and we're trying to see where our habit patterns, our mental behaviors are actually not of value, that they're causing more damage than they are good. If the owner of a business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. That's a profound statement to me. We go over and over again. We go through these lies that are part of holding on to a resentment, and it's a real challenge because I'm believing my own thinking, and of course the spiritual appendix is going to say the one thing that will prevent you from all spiritual progress, and we could substitute the one thing that will prevent you from having a relationship with your creator is to believe your own thinking, is contempt prior to investigation, is holding on to my idea, my old idea, um, and basically being closed-minded. It closes the mind, and then I'm not open to any kind of new information or a new experience. And why, for many of us, that set aside prayer is so important. Please set aside everything I think I know about everything so I can have an open mind and a new experience. Doesn't say remove them, doesn't say eliminate them. It says set them aside so we don't have to um, be concerned about a sense of loss or anything else. Any rate, uh, if I'm to be successful, I cannot fool myself about values, and my mind tells me resentment is a good idea. The first lie is that I'm unhappy, but it's not my fault. It is your fault. If you would behave differently, I could be happy. And then the second lie is resenting you is going to be an effective way to get you to change your behavior. You're going to see the error of your ways because you don't want to experience my resentment, and you're going to change based on my sending you ill will. You're going to become a different person. And then, frankly, you'll be a better person. I'll be able to be happy. The world will be a better place. Hooray for resentment. This is a good thing. And then the awfulest lie, that I could never treat another person the way you're treating me. That's the one that I think we hide from, and that we only find out in the fourth column when we get over to the turnarounds and we're looking at our behavior, and then we start to see how I have behaved. It may Things may be different, but I behaved precisely the way you're behaving, and of course in my mind, the lie is I could not behave that way, and that's what gives me the power or the right to resent you. I could never do that. So facing that lie is, I think, huge. It's a hard thing about this process to look at that. Okay, so then it says, this next paragraph, we read this last week. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, number one, we search out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. So they're saying the flaws in our makeup cause us to fail or feel unsuccessful at life. Um, Being convinced, now this is presuming that I am convinced that this is true. We're supposed to be convinced in of the ABCs before we get to the third step prayer. Being convinced that I am alcoholic, cannot manage my life, being convinced no human power, nothing of the body, nothing of the mind is going to ease my agony. um, See, God can and will if I will seek a relationship with God. We got to be convinced before even the third step. Now I got to be convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what has defeated me, and I am to consider its common manifestations. Well, uh, we do it. Its common manifestations, of course, are resentment, fear, and my remorse around my selfishness. But that's a kind of a secondary thing. The what we find out in that third column is the common manifestations of ourselves are our pride, our sense of how other people are looking at me, my self-esteem, how I feel about myself, my ambitions, what I want to have happen here, my sense of security, my sense of personal safety. This is huge. Um, my relationships, my interactions with others, and including sex, and finally my financial, my pocketbook. These, and we are to look at where are these hurt or threatened. That implies fear. And I know I say over and over again in terms of me, the one that is always my ambitions are hurt or threatened. I resent people when they seem to be standing in the way of my ambitions, whether it's in a relationship or in AA, or for me in the stock market when I'm investing in little companies in the stock market and they don't they don't do what I want them to do, or they don't the market doesn't respond the way I want the market to respond. My ambitions are hurt or threatened. And so I'm just going to jump, but I'll come back to this. So I know I say over and over again, and you'll pardon me for repeating it, but it's taken me a long time to get this. So page 67, 68, and 69 are critical, I think, to sobriety, because if I don't learn how to handle my resentments, my fears, and my sense of remorse around my selfish behavior, if I don't learn how to handle those, I'm going to drink again, or I'm going to want to drink again, or I'm going to seek some other behavior that is going to be contrary to my growing along spiritual lines, because it creates an inner tension that I can't live with and that I want relief from. We say all the time, anybody having trouble staying away from a drink tonight in a meeting, early in the meeting. And oftentimes not much happens. If you if you change the question, anybody needs some relief from what they're thinking tonight, you'd have a conversation, because most all of us need relief from what's going on up in here. So the work is trying to figure out the relief. Another thing for me over and over again is the beginning of um, chapter 6, into action. It says, the second sentence says, we're trying to get a new attitude. We're trying to get a new relationship with our Creator. And we're trying to discover what's in the way of doing that, the obstacles in our path. These are the obstacles: resentment, fear, and remorse. That's what's in my way. So if I don't learn how to handle them, I'm not going to get very far. So 67 says, well, here's what not to do: avoid retaliation or argument. You wouldn't treat sick people that way. It's not helpful. And then it makes this wonderful promise: we cannot be helpful to everybody. That's really important to those of us that are trying to be helpful. It's saying you're not going to be able to, even when they're close to you. This is the hardest thing. Even when it's a child or a spouse or a significant other or a parent that may be dying or whatever, we cannot be helpful to all people. This is huge. And what we are to seek is a kindly and tolerant view. I can't do it. I can say it. I can't do it. I'm not able to get there with a whole number of people in the world. But I absolutely believe a kindly, tolerant view is the same as serenity. And it is the same as being patient, tolerant, kind, and loving. That is serenity. And I'm convinced I need to ask to be shown the way. That's why we read that. It's one of our opening readings. Relieve me of the bondage of myself and show me the way of patience and tolerance and kindness and love. Particularly because I am impatient, intolerant, unkind, which means selfish, and frightened, which is the opposite of love. Okay. Resentment is the number one offender, destroys more alcoholics than anything else. We talked about it last week. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. And then this another promise: when the spiritual malady is overcome, we will straighten out mentally and physically. We were talking about fear before we started this morning, and it is not to deny the value of physical fear and mental fear, because mental fear can cause you to behave differently in the future going forward, that will have a positive impact on your life. We're not saying fear is bad. It's when it gets obsessive and I believe that fear is that all my character defects are my habitual responses to fear. And my first responder to fear is anger. We talked about it last week: fight, flight, or disappear. Those are the three fundamental responses. Fight is resentment. That is retaliation or argument. I'm trying to get back at you by arguing with your behavior and wanting you to be different. 68 says we never apologize for God. Well, fighting anger and retaliation or argument, that's apologizing for God in my way, for me. And instead, we let God demonstrate through us what God can do. We ask to be shown the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. And when you get to remorse, page 69, it says we are not to judge. And it says we're not to judge these people caught up in the controversy about sex, more sex or less sex or whatever. It includes me judging me. And then it's going to say instead, I believe this is the heart of the whole matter. Instead, we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. A constant endeavor to ask God to mold our ideals and help me live up to them. That's step 11. So we're in resentment. I don't mean to get off, but I could say, what's in the way of me asking God to mold my ideals and help me live up to them? Well, what's in the way is I'm kind of busy up in here. I'm kind of busy managing the world and trying to get people to be different than they naturally are. And there's a lot of noise up in here. And so one of the things I got to do is lower the volume on the noise. And going through the resentment inventory and the fear inventory and the sex remorse around our sex are ways of lowering the noise. First of all, most of us don't even know what's going on. Most of it's happening subconsciously. It's not constant. We just know we're not feeling very good. But what is really the trouble, we don't know. And I believe that it's revolutionary for me to discover that resentment is really about fear. What shows up is my well, I'm not sure what to call my lack of doubt my conviction that feeling negatively toward you is a good thing. I don't experience self-doubt when I'm angry, and I hate self-doubt. Self-doubt is at the root of most of my troubles. I'm not sure what I'm doing or what I'm supposed to do, and why for me it's such a wonderful solution that I'm told, you tell me, ask God to mold your ideals, and because lack of power is your dilemma, ask God to help you live up to them. And why step 11 is saying, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us. That's God's ideals for us and the power to carry that out. Lack of power is always at the heart of the issue, and how to get power is always at the heart of the solution. And our steps are a way of overcoming our dilemma of lack of power. So that's why I say when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. When we deal with resentments, we set them on paper, listed people, institutions, principles with whom we were angry. So also earlier in the meeting, Joyce mentioned she's aware of fear of success. Well, that's a principle. And if she puts that fear of, I feel like sometimes I'm afraid of being successful. She's not, she maybe know why, but I wouldn't know why. I can understand that. If you put that in column 1, and then you put a couple of examples, all you need are a couple of examples in column 2. Column 3, you just start running through those things: pride, self-esteem, ambitions, sense of security, but you got to dwell on them. I always dealt with them as multiple choice, and the answer was all the above, and I never really thought about, well, how are my ambitions impacted, or how is my pride or my self-esteem impacted, or in what way am I not feeling safe in this situation? It's wonderful if you just add the word how to after, how is this affecting my pride, self-esteem, or ambitions? So a principle, really, I believe this is when you get done with people and you're not feeling as much resentment, go to deeply held self-concepts that you're holding on to, we hold on to, that color our responses to our lives. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our send runs through them again, our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal and sex relationships. And then they run through these 3 columns, and then of course on the next page, or page 67, we're going to get instructions for the 4th column. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. Well, we get to interpret this book any way we want that works for us. By the way my sponsor did it with me was, I was responsible for those first 3 columns. But when it got to the 4th column, I needed his help, and he was ready to. We considered it carefully together. I didn't have to do the turnarounds all by myself. And it's just so true that when a person is outside of my thought system, they can see the fallacies of the way I think, the things that don't add up or don't make sense, or particularly, what about the other person? What do you, so, okay. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. And then I love this sentence. It nails most of us. To conclude that others were wrong, this is the top of page 66, was as far as most of us ever got. I sit in my ill will toward you because I've concluded that you're wrong. I've concluded that hating on you or just being annoyed with you, it doesn't have to be hate, is an effective behavior to get you to change. And I stay there. I harbor a resentment. Later on, it's going to use the word harbor. So I'm a boater. Harbors, safe harbors are what you long for, where you're protected from the wind and the currents and whatever it is. I protect my resentments. I don't take an honest look at them. And so I wind up living in that awful contempt prior to investigation that doesn't feel good, but I don't even know why or what to do. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. Usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse. So this is the third thing. Remorse is when I'm feeling bad about me. And that's my response when I'm doing the sex. And it's not just about sex, it's about all my human interaction. When I place my interest above the interests of the other person, and then I wind up feeling bad about it. I wind up feeling remorseful that I've done that. Sometimes it was remorse, then we were sore at ourselves, but the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. He's just brilliant. I know all this stuff came from the Oxford groups, and I know we talked about it last week. We read about Frank Buckman. That Frank Buckman is the guy that first saw that resentment was an obstacle to his relationship with God, that he could not feel connected when he was harboring a resentment, and that he had to get rid of the resentment. And that's what this book is trying to say. It is plain. I keep saying, turn these statements into a question. So I'll read it that way. Is it plain to me that if my life includes deep resentment, I will only experience a feeling of futility and unhappiness? What's the use? What's the point? All of that stuff. Sometimes we wake up with that and we don't even know. And then he says this, to the precise extent that I allow resentments to continue, do I squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? One of my deepest fears is of waste of time, money, energy, because I don't want to hear my mind saying, oh, that was useless and stupid, and you should have known better. And it's the you should have known better that really is the twist of the knife for me. I want to think I'm a smart guy and I'm handling life, and hearing that I should have known better. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't like that. That hurts pretty good. So the idea of squandering, but note this, to the precise extent, 2 pages later, it's going to say, to the precise extent that I humbly rely on God and try to be the person I think God wants me to be, I will be enabled to meet my resentment and my fear and my remorse with a sense of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love, instead of feeling awful. Meet the calamity with serenity. Whatever the calamity happens to be, and whatever you think of as serenity for you. To the precise extent that we permit these resentments, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? But with the alcoholic, and I like to add the word only, whose only hope, it says whose only hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, because we've only got two alternatives, right? Going on to the bitter end, trying to blot out of our minds how miserable we are, or accepting spiritual help. In this case, accepting spiritual help to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. Whose only hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. This business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. Why? Because I can't live with it. It creates an experience inside that I need relief from. And then I'm going to do something dumb seeking relief. And if it's taking the first drink, which is what my habit pattern is, I'm going to die sooner or later. We found it's fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. This is Frank Buckman's genius. He experienced that his resentment toward his former employers, goes to England, to Oxford, England, to get away from his former employers, thinking I'll just do a geographic. It's probably the first geographic in our AA's history. And he experiences his resentment blocking him from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, the insanity that taking the first drink is a good idea. And we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. Resentment is a form of anger, which I'm telling you is my first responder to my fear, and why I have to find the fear if I don't want to live with the anger. And that third column is where I will find the fear. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouse and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, just like alcohol is maybe a dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. They will kill us. Turn back to the list, holds the key to the future, prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us in that state. Oh, I love this. The wrongdoings of others, fancied or real. It doesn't matter if it's the truth or not. It doesn't matter. Had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to escape from our fear around our life by going to a resource so much greater than our human bodies and our human minds, and asking that power to mold our ideals and give us the power to live up to them. Cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. This was our course. We realized the people who wronged us were perhaps, why, perhaps, were definitely spiritually sick. But that ain't enough. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. That, like ourselves, most of us tend to miss that. They're spiritually sick. I know it. I can see it, but it's important that I acknowledge, like me. And then this challenge, you got to find a person. There's got to be a person in your life to whom you can naturally show the same tolerance, pity, and patience. This won't work if you don't have, and some of us don't. I always use my daughter because when she was born, I experienced something I just hadn't experienced before. An overwhelming sense of I wanted to love and protect her, and she could do no wrong. And so when I'm hating on somebody, and then I read this book saying, you're supposed to offer this person you're hating on the same tolerance, pity, and patience you would cheerfully grant your daughter. And then my self-justifying mind gets all busy telling me, well, no, not in this case. I don't have to know. That doesn't make sense. So, but that's what it says. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick person. How can I be helpful? Save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And then here's the line I was talking about before. We avoid retaliation or argument, wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. Cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us if we ask and if we're able to listen, how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this last paragraph the next time we meet. I just want to go into some other things. And And so there's a poet named Mary Oliver. She's dead now, but and she wrote volumes of poetry, and one of them is called Messenger. And then I'm going to read the whole thing to you and then focus on one particular line. Um, My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums, here the clam deep in the speckled sand. She lived on Cape Cod. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The Phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing, since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude, to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever. So the line that always jumps out at me, the message is we live forever. Your body and mind may die, but your spiritual self continues. Um, we are all part of one thing. The line that I love, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. You know, what's in the way of me being astonished by my miraculous presence here on planet Earth? Well, it's going to be all my attitudes about my life, over which I am powerless. I can't change my attitudes without some effort. And these steps are a way to change our attitude and create a whole different deal. Um, and how is this any different than be still and know this is all God? It's our inability to be still that is a major obstacle to serious prayer, meditation, contemplation, three different kinds of things. Prayer is putting my issue out there, asking for help. Meditation is trying to listen for answers to that. Contemplation is a whole nother thing. It's kind of a wordless communion with higher power. It's not an intellectual. It's not a wordy thing. Um, okay, so the object here is to be able to be still, and so I just some for it doesn't matter. Last week I got into reading this thing. It's in AA Comes of Age, which was the first book that the conference published about AA. The second was Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, Dr. Bob's biography, and the third was Pass It On, Bill Wilson's biography. But the first one, AA Comes of Age, they talk about how they came out of the flying blind period, and this is a national conference, and a bunch of talks were given, and the book is basically a transcription of a lot of these talks, and it has a bunch of appendixes, and they in the appendixes they look at AA from a religious standpoint, and they also look at it from a medical standpoint. And so this is appendix in Pass It On, I'm sorry, in AA Comes of Age. And this is by a psychiatrist named Harry Tiebout, Tiebout. And he lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, but he had numerous conversations with Mr. X, who is Bill Wilson. And what he's trying to do is he cannot deny that AA has accomplished something which nobody else has, and that is to get drunks to contented sobriety. And so he's trying to understand it from a medical point of view, even though, as Silkworth says in the doctor's opinion, I'm pretty good on the mind and the body. I've been trained, I can do this stuff. But when you get to the spiritual stuff, I'm out of my league. I can see its effect. I can see the truth of it, but I'm not prepared to talk about it. So at any rate, the beginning of this article, the work of Alcoholics Anonymous has a threefold aspect. We got our triangle. First, the group has weekly gatherings where experiences are related and problems discussed. Second, all are urged to read their book, Alcoholics Anonymous, which contains their basic tenets and must be read if one is to arrive at any understanding of their program. Third, the members work with prospects who are making their initial contact with the group. Remember, this is before sponsorship was a named thing. Work with prospects who are making their initial contact with the group. Helping others is a two-way situation, since it not only assists the beginner in his first efforts at sobriety, but also helps the helper, who derives from his efforts something which is essential for his continued sobriety. Boy, he's got it. He's got that part of it. So he goes on and atmosphere of hope and encouragement. Calls it the central therapeutic force is religion. Religion is probably not the best word, but being willing to grow along spiritual lines. Talks about a woman that was his patient, and she eventually gets sober through Alcoholics Anonymous. He says it, she's reading the monoliths. She's reading before this is the original manuscript for the book before it was published. He comes into this, gets this monolith, and he gives it to her. Anyway, so this is maybe the third page of this thing. Okay, let's see. He's talking about her recovery and her sobriety. Something had taken place under my very nose, which could not be doubted and which could not be explained as a mere coincidence. It's like when Silkworth says, to me, these things are phenomena. Not Silkworth, Jung says that. I can see it, but I can't explain it. What had happened? My answer is that the patient had had a religious or spiritual experience. The answer, however, did not prove particularly enlightening. It was not until much later that I began to appreciate the real meaning of the answer. So then before he's going to go on to try to explain this thing and discuss this new character structure, he wants to talk about, let's see. There is a growing recognition of certain common qualities which are regularly present in alcoholics, excepting those who have had a frank underlying mental condition. So he's saying, except for the really insane, there are certain feelings that are common qualities to most of us alcoholics. You may not enjoy hearing this. Characteristic of the so-called typical alcoholic is a narcissistic, egocentric core dominated by feelings of omnipotence, intent at maintaining at all costs its inner integrity. I have a hard time reading that, and because I take umbrage with narcissistic people. I've been around extremely narcissistic people, and I get real uncomfortable, and I don't want to. I'm not narcissistic. I don't want to be narcissistic. So this morning I went I went to searched what's the definition of narcissism. Well, it's excessive interest in or admiration of oneself. Well, I'm not going to claim I admire myself. That's always been a real struggle for me. Self-esteem, I don't know what it is, but but excessive interest in myself, I'm going to tell you that until recently, I can recognize I have been obsessively interested in my mind and my body and not as interested in my soul. And it's only now at this advanced age where I know the end of my body and my mind is coming, that it finally occurs to me, you keep investing in your mind and your body. How about investing in your soul? That's going to keep on going. Your mind and your body is not. Why don't you do the things that are good for your soul's health instead of all these things that are focused? So I can cop to this excessive interest in my mind and my body. It goes on, needing admiration, thinking highly of oneself, believing others are inferior, lacking empathy for others. Well, I have not. I normally don't think highly of myself. I don't think I do need admiration, for sure. Um, I don't want to think I think others are inferior. Um, but when they get to lack of empathy, you know, normally I don't have empathy for the sick man prayer is saying I'm supposed to be feeling, have some tolerance, pity, and patience for this person that's behaving the way they're behaving. And as I've told you, I can't do it. Um, but I'm not able to get to empathy. I mean, I can't, doesn't matter, but in that way, I'm going to have to claim, yep, okay, I'm, I'm narcissistic. And then the defiant thing, the words that they came up with, let's see, where is it? It's later on. While these characteristics are found in other maladjustments, they appear to be a relatively pure culture in alcoholic after alcoholic. Then this other guy reports he could discern outlines of common character structure among problem drinkers, and the best terms he could find for the group of qualities was noted as defiant individuality and grandiosity. In my opinion, those words were accurately chosen. Inwardly, the alcoholic brooks no control from man or God. He, the alcoholic, is and must be master of his destiny. He will fight to the end to preserve that position. Ouch. Um, especially the defiant part. We have a woman with 50 something years and tell me I will and I won't. Tell me I won't and I will. She'll just say whatever. Somebody else, is just defiant. I heard it the other day. This defiant person, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Now, how can you reconcile that attitude with we ask God to mold our ideals and help me live up to them? The line that says we are in this world to play the role God assigns. Not on your life. I'm designing my role. Um, so I just wanted. I'm going to stop now, but I just wanted to end with more and more. I see that lack of power is my dilemma, and what I lack power over is me and the habitual habit patterns, energy forces of my personality as it responds to the world. And I do want a new attitude. I do want this new relationship with my creator. And I do want to figure out what's in the way of that. And my defiant, grandiose self centeredness is at the heart of that. And so all the things that we do, the prayer, the meditation, the meetings, the service, all this stuff, that's how we get out of this. That's how we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. And So I'm going to stop and we're going to have some open discussion. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. We'll stop recording. Did it stop? I think.